Red shift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Okay, so this is going to be the second video in which I continue a really long script that is a response to an hour-long video that Square Peg made about me quite a while ago. I can't remember, maybe a few months ago or something. The script goes like this, and again, this is just part two. There's probably going to be a bunch of parts of it, but the script continues like this. And like I said before, it's not about going on a spree to pass on your genes. It's about if you're going to go on a spree anyway because of the horrific tyranny, then why not save your sperm so, you can also pass on your genes. It's pretty simple. And this is not a way of getting pussy, as Square Peg characterized it in his video. You're not getting any pussy, you're dead or in prison. You're just making sure your brave, virtuous, above-average intelligence genes are getting passed on, instead of white women passing on their genes with low-IQ black men who charm them into bed with no intention of using a condom and with no intention of staying with her to help her raise the child that will result from that sex. Black men turn tons of black women into single mothers, and black men turn an even greater percentage of white women into single mothers. And concerning the right to pass on your genes, that's basically every man's right. Women are helped by the government to pass on their genes, so they're getting to fulfill their biological imperative, so why aren't men? You're acting like it's not a given that men should be able to pass on their genes. No, it is a given. It's a basic human right. 200 years ago, when America was free and used honest money, basically all men who wanted to get married and have kids were able to do so. That's how it used to be, and that's how it still should be. So who is really approving of the devaluation of men if you're acting like, oh, it's not a given that men should be able to pass on their genes? That is a bullshit, elitist, gynocentric attitude. And as far as, oh, peaceful resolution is still the way to change things, no, it's not. How fucking naive are you? That's retarded. Anybody who thinks we can fix this through voting or peaceful protesting is a moron. I mean, yeah, if we had tens of millions of people who are peacefully protesting by blocking freeways every single day and chaining their arms together locked together inside of, pipes and stuff so that it was very, very hard to arrest them and disconnect them and stuff. Yeah, if you were doing that shit, then yeah, you could accomplish a lot by peaceful means if you had millions of people doing that. I'm all for peaceful revolution if it works, but when you got 99%, more like 99.9% of the population totally blue-pilled, just super ignorant because of the elites' propaganda, then no, peaceful revolution is not possible. And how many times have you had an empire collapse and it's been a nice, peaceful transition to better things? Come on, grow a brain. What's going to happen is that China's going to take over the world. They're going to enslave the whole entire world, and then America will just be as poor and enslaved as it is today, only it'll be perpetually that way, as all our wealth will be getting siphoned by China. Instead of us siphoning wealth from the world like we're doing through the petrodollar, they'll be siphoning our wealth. And we won't even have the petrodollar anymore. And we'll be enslaved, but we'll be very, very poor. And we'll be working to make China rich, to make China more powerful. Just like the whole world has been working to make America rich for the last 40 years by paying the price for America's inflation through the petrodollar. So it's pretty ridiculous to act like peaceful means are going to solve the problems in America today. Brooke Higgins is 100% correct when she said that chaos and violence and evil are now the only path forward with any real hope. She was absolutely right about that. I don't like it, but it's just a fucking fact. And you get abused and taken advantage of and robbed and cucked and raped and all the rest of it as much as you allow. It is that fucking simple. And if you are not willing to use violence, you are allowing all horrific things to happen to you. And if you have to resort to violence eventually to protect yourself, well then just accept it as a philosophical inevitability. Accept it as a moral inevitability and just, accept it and start advocating for it. Because if you're going to cave and resort to violence to protect yourself if someone's going to try to rape you or steal from you or kill you, well then stop acting like you're a pacifist and advocate for violence. There is no fucking way we're fixing this without violence, or at least the only other solution is forming eugenic communes and getting our kids, and especially our grandkids and great-grandkids, much, much smarter, and having them all code tons and tons of subversive stuff so that the government gets eventually marginalized by all the digital stuff being written that the government can't control. That's the only way to do it non-violently. The only way. A little later on in Square Peg's response, he basically makes my point for me, which is that welfare for single mothers makes it so that a lot of guys can't get girlfriends. So it's not like, oh yeah, go on a spree to get pussy. No, it's like, you can't get pussy because people aren't going on sprees. The more people were going on sprees, the more the sexual marketplace would get straightened out, and then men would be able to get sex. You know, these, you know, incel men and even regular men would be more easily able to get girlfriends or sex or whatever, or at least someone of their value, instead of 7 out of 10 guys having to settle for 4 or 5 out of 10 women, or 8 out of 10 guys having to settle for 5 out of 10 women, or 4 out of 10 women. Men would be able to get women of their own SMV if we had more men brave enough to go on sprees. The reason they can't, the reason they have to settle for really crappy women, is because people aren't going on sprees. The more people that are more violent, the more we can roll back tyranny. And the more we do that, the less need there is for violence. And then people won't be violent because there'll be no need for violence. Plus, the more people are willing to be violent to roll back tyranny, the less violent they have to be. If you get 50 million people, or even just 20 million people willing to exsanguinate, but they're not hell-bent on doing so if they don't have to, right? Like, then they all go to Washington, D.C., with a gun on their hip and a backpack full of bullets, and then you can take over the government immediately without any violence, because the government will immediately cave when, 20 to 50 million people are, armed, and they arrive on their doorstep saying, we're going to kill you unless you, surrender the government and declare the government illegitimate, right? So we can start over from scratch. Right? Like, the more people you have on your side, the less violent you have to be. But when almost no one is willing to do their part, then the very few people who are willing to do their part and feel a moral imperative to do their part, they have to do the most extreme actions possible because of everybody else not helping them. The more people that help, the less that has to be done. Many hands make light work. Or in other words, many rebels makes a non-violent revolution. But when there's few rebels, then yes, the revolution has to be super, super violent, including horrific terrorism. So the more people you get on your side, the less violence you actually have to do, but the fewer people who are willing to exsanguinate others, like politicians, the more extreme the violence has to be in order to accomplish anything. When there's only one brave person willing to do something, he has to be willing to pay the ultimate price, like Snowden, or like, Manassian, or like Tarrant. Snowden was risking life in prison. He might not have gotten away with it. He might have ended up in prison for the rest of his life. He was willing to pay the ultimate price, life in prison, maybe even getting raped by other men for the rest of his life in prison. I don't know what prison he would have ended up in or what kind of, level of security, so maybe he wouldn't have gotten raped, but maybe he would have. He was willing to take that risk, though, in order to do the right thing, because no one else was willing to, and so he had to take that risk. He had to do something extreme. He had to leak government documents, and he had to take the risk of life in prison, all because no one else was willing to do the right thing. That's the way it is. The fewer people who are willing to do the right thing, the higher the price that has to be paid by those few people. And the more extreme their actions have to be to resist the tyranny. And the more people who are willing to do the right thing, the lower the price they have to pay, and the less extreme their resistance has to be, until eventually when enough people are resisting, such as tens of millions, they don't have to pay any price, because there are too many of them to throw in prison, and too many for the government to kill or resist or do anything to. And so they don't have to do any violence. Those people don't. Those protesters, because the government will instantly surrender because it will be hopelessly overwhelmed. And as far as not being able to end welfare or whatever through violent means, says who? Governments have been overthrown in the past, and this one can be too. It's cowardly and defeatist to act as if the U.S. can't be overthrown using force. Violence has solved the problem of tyranny more times throughout all of human history than anything else has. And this is because violence is the base level way of fighting. It underlies everything else, and it will never stop being the base level of fighting that underlies everything else, and which can be resorted to when one is losing the battle at a higher level, such as economic warfare or public perception warfare. The bad guys are always going to resort to a lower, more base level of fighting when they lose at a higher level. So eventually it all comes down to physical violence anyway. Always has and always will until we are non-physical gods or something. Until we're non-physical beings, physical war will always be the base level that you always have to resort to ultimately. Square Peg also said that you can't stop paying taxes because the government and the military are dependent on taxes, and so they will view that as a threat to their livelihood. Okay, well, if they're willing to enforce a tyrannical system just for a paycheck, then they are the problem, and they should be overthrown and killed. That's all the more reason to have a revolutionary war where the cops and the military are all wiped out. Genocide of all cops and military. I'm calling for it right now. I'm declaring a war in the United States right now. I'm declaring a state of war in the United States, and I say genocide for all cops and military because they're all legitimate enemy combatants, because they're all supporting a tyrannical system. Except for the ones who do the right thing and want to join our side. And if there's enough of us exsanguinating cops and military, if there's 1 million U.S. citizens doing it every day, then the cops and military people are going to cave real quick. They're going to cave, and then they'll join our side, and then we can really deal with the government. And as far as capitalist solutions, offering them a better deal than the government offers them, yeah, that's an interesting idea. Why not? Hey, any solution that works. Although that solution does smack of bribery, of extortion, like paying the mob protection money, when really you're just paying the mob to leave you alone. It's fucking ridiculous. Right, so I don't know that that's the best idea. I mean, it's an okay idea, I guess, worth considering, but I don't think it's an amazing idea or anything. Especially considering the ones who are more likely to do that for money are probably scumbags, right? It's like they're scumbags, and that's why they're taking the money to do the right thing. It's like, shouldn't you kill those guys and only accept the people onto your side if they're not willing to take money? If they're willing to do if they're going to do the right thing without being offered to be paid, right? He made an interesting point when he said that the more dense the population is in the same area, the more laws or regulations you're going to have. Yes, I've already thought of this. It seems like a logical thing to say, and in a sense, he's definitely correct, but he's actually wrong, because what is needed is not more regulations or laws. He's talking about like under anarcho-capitalism. Well, you have more population, you got to have more laws or regulations. He claims to be an anarcho-capitalist. We don't believe in any laws whatsoever, we anarcho-capitalists don't. We believe in everyone having absolute rights to deal out any punishment at any time, and everybody has that right, so no one goes overboard, because he knows someone else will punish him if he goes overboard in his punishment of someone else. So everyone holds each other accountable that way, because they fear other people's possible violent responses to their own actions. So if you want to have a sane society, everybody has to be totally free to punish bad behavior, because if they don't have that freedom, then who's going to hold bad people in check? The government? No, government is lying, mass murdering, thieving evil, and it's not anarcho-capitalism if you have government. So who's going to hold people in check if not everybody holding each other in check? You see, so everybody having absolute rights to do anything they want, that's the only way to keep people in check without government. And government is lying, mass murdering, thieving evil, so that's not a solution. So yes, there is an increased need for either technology to make it easier for more people to live together in a smaller space, or there's a need for more morality, more virtue. Your moral standard has to get higher and higher and higher so you can continue living harmoniously with all these people who you're in very close proximity with. The more the population goes up, the more everybody has to have a higher moral standard to keep from fighting with people, right? Because of everybody being crammed closer and closer and closer together, right? But you can't just make rules and expect people to follow them. How do you get people to follow these rules? You're back to the problem of government, the problem of non-consensual force, of forcing people to adhere to rules that they don't agree with. But like the real way to fix the problem is to have anarcho-capitalism. And when you have anarcho-capitalism, people are probably not going to congregate so much in the same tight area, because it's government that intentionally herded everyone into the cities today. But that would not naturally happen under anarcho-capitalism. People would be way more spread out. And even if it did happen and people were congregating in the cities, this would only be done by people who wanted to be there and could get along with each other, or could get along with other people sniping at each other all the time. They could tolerate it, right? Because of everybody hating living so close to everybody else. I mean, they'd hate it, but they don't really hate it, or else they'd leave, right? But if you have anarcho-capitalism, then the violence might get more and more extreme the tighter people are packed in together with each other. But the higher amount of violence would automatically enforce a sharper distinction between people who have different views of how to live, or what etiquette is, or whatever. Ways of living that conflict with each other. And so under anarcho-capitalism, people will self-segregate even more, so that they can get along with each other better. A more fine-grained self-segregation will just automatically naturally happen so that people can get along better. And the people who did violate the unofficial rules would have either more and more extreme violence done to them as punishment, or they'd be kicked out of the community for smaller and smaller infractions of the rules. What this means is that there would be more extreme violence for violations of what people consider to be acceptable behavior, but there would be no centralized authority, no law, no regulations. There would just be unofficial rules that people are supposed to follow within a certain little area, because they've all agreed that if you're going to live in this area, you got to follow these rules of behavior. So the more the population is like that, tight, really densely populated, this means there's going to be more extreme violence for those who break the rules. And that more extreme violence for those who break the rules is going to cause a finer... That more extreme violence for those who break the rules is going to cause a more fine-grained self-segregation. But it'll also cause people to be way more careful about following the unofficial rules, about being moral, about doing everything with a benevolent motivation in mind, being polite, etc. And there will be no judges or juries handing out punishments for those who do break the unofficial rules or act unkindly or rudely or whatever. No, it's just the case that the person who breaks the rules takes a chance that one of the other people in the community will punish him if he breaks one of the rules. And the denser the population, the higher the chances that someone will punish him. And the denser the population, the more violent that punishment is likely to be. But there's a limit to how many people can live together in the same space, and there's a natural limit to how extreme violence can get. So it won't get horrific or anything. It will never get to the point where someone accidentally bumps into someone in the hall, and then the person murders the other person for the offense. It's never going to get that bad. But maybe it would get to the point where if you clog the toilet and you don't fix it, then you get your back, lashed with a whip in public. You know, like in that movie with Denzel Washington, you know, where he's getting lashed, and then that one tear comes out of his eye. Can't remember what movie that was. Maybe it was that Matthew Broderick movie, Glory. Maybe that's what it was. But yeah, like maybe you get a lashing or something if you like clog the toilet and you don't fix it or tell anybody or hire anybody to fix it. So like the more dense the population becomes, the better behaved people will be forced to become out of fear of being punished by someone else who feels like punishing them for their bad behavior. And if someone is just stupid or naturally lazy or sloppy and finds it impossible to follow all the unofficial rules, then the people will kick them out of the community. And then that less sophisticated, less cultured, less concerned, less polite person will go live in a far less populated location in the country. You know, a place where other uncouth, undisciplined people live, and he or she might have to live a lower standard of living because of it, but he or she will be freer to act as he or she pleases without fear of punishment by anyone else. But you could also mitigate population growth by building a lot of huge underground structures that can house a lot of people, and by making the ceilings, floors, and walls 100% soundproof in each apartment or condo or whatever, so that no matter how much the person below you smacks his roof, and no matter how much you stomp your foot on the floor, neither of you will ever hear the tiniest bit of sound from the other person's actions. And similarly with the walls, right? Like that way you're living in very close proximity to each other, but you are not bothered by them in the slightest, by anybody else in any other nearby apartments at all, right? At least not when you're in your apartment and the door is closed, right? So you can also use better building techniques to make people's lives not interfere with each other and not piss each other off as well. You can also do that, right? So increased population does not necessitate government, and it doesn't necessitate official rules or official enforcement of rules either, whether by government or by any other group, because if you have like forced rules, that's not anarcho-capitalism, right? Unless you have an anarcho-capitalist area within the anarcho-capitalist country that, like, you know, if you don't want to follow the rules, you can go to live there. Then I guess you could say it's consensual, and then you're not actually forcing anybody. Not to mention, as price for food and water and other necessities rises with population increase, this means that eventually people will not be able to afford more than one kid. People will only be able to afford one kid. And then the population will start decreasing and will eventually reach an equilibrium until technology increases further to enable the population to increase again. You know, you can build higher buildings, or, you know, you can grow more food or whatever, and then you can grow the population again, but only after technology increases, right? And until then, people will have to satisfy themselves with having only, one or two kids. Squarepeg says I'm not an anarcho-capitalist, and then I'm actually an anarcho-fascist. No, fascism is centralized authority. I'm opposed to centralized authority. I'm even opposed to centralized authority that is collective, like democracy. I'm against violations of free will. The problem with democracy is that it has tricked everybody into thinking that since we don't have one dictator, one emperor or king with absolute authority who is in charge for his whole life, we therefore have freedom because we have representatives who are constantly switching out with other people. But that doesn't mean you don't have tyranny. That can be just as bad as having a dictator. It can actually be far worse because it's way less efficient. You know, there's way more conflict. People are tricked into thinking they're free when they're not, etc. So it's actually way worse to have this collective decision-making rather than having people have total freedom. No, anarchy means no rulers, sure, but that implies no rules. I don't know why I said no there. I guess I was just like disagreeing with this whole idea there that like I'm an anarcho-fascist and stuff. But like I was saying, anarchy means no rulers. Sure, but that implies no rules. Like, why does it imply no rules? Because otherwise you're talking about rules that are enforced. Who are they enforced by? They're enforced by either one person, like a dictator, a king, or a warlord, or they're enforced by a collective like the U.S. government. A bunch of representatives and judges and a president is regularly replaced. But like I said, that's often more tyrannical, not less tyrannical. And do you really want the 49% to be oppressed by the 51%? Judges are the third branch. And then I think I said some stuff there, but it didn't make sense, so I had to delete it. Or I couldn't, must have, maybe some fuck-ups, or maybe I got behind when I was transcribing it from the voice recorder, so I missed a sentence or two, but it didn't make any sense, so I deleted it. And then I kind of skipped to this part here where I'm talking about judges. I'm not sure how I got on that topic, but I wrote, judges are the third branch of the U.S. government. They therefore, not only are they the other branch of the U.S. government, and they therefore are part of the rules, and so even under so-called anarcho-capitalism or any form of anarchy, if you have judges, you do have rulers still, and they can be bribed. Anybody with official power position. an official position of authority, even if it's merely the 51 of the population itself through direct democracy, that's still just as tyrannical. So you cannot have any rules or any rulers, not even a collective rulership. Having judges, having direct democracy forcing the will of the majority on the minority, that's not anarchy. That's not freedom. That's just trying to change tyranny into a slightly more decentralized form, but it's not even really any freer. See, what I want is direct democracy where the 49% or the 24% or the 6% or the 2% or whatever can fork the blockchain or the investment or whatever. They can divest from their ownership of the infrastructure or whatever. They can cash out, and then they can use that money to try to build new infrastructure the way that works the way they want it to. So they're not stuck owning part of something that is operating in a way that they don't agree with, such as like everyone having joint ownership of the water purification center. Right? If 30% of people don't want the water fluoridated anymore, but the other 70% of people want it to continue to be fluoridated, then the 30% can cash out, like selling stock. And then they can use that money to build a new water purification plant that does not fluoridate the water. Everything can be split when there's a disagreement. And this creates more competition. And it prevents anything from being forced on anyone. It's the only free and competitive way to do things. Being an anarcho-capitalist means that you believe in total freedom, or an anarchist of any kind, really, technically, but I don't think anarcho-capitalism is actually anarchy, because it actually does believe in some authority, and that's no good. I already rebutted it in a previous video, but unfortunately, I think it was on my first or second channel, which I had to delete, so that I didn't get 3 strikes and then lose all my channels. So, yeah, I guess that video is probably not up anymore, but, yeah, I did rebut, what I tried to rebut anarcho-communism. I'm not certain I'm 100%, I'm not super versed in it or anything, but anyway, I'm getting off topic. Like I was saying, being an anarchist, anarcho-capitalism specifically, in my opinion, means that you believe in total freedom. And you cannot have freedom if there are any rules forced on anyone. It doesn't mean there cannot be unofficial or agreed upon rules that are voluntarily agreed upon by everybody, and no one has to follow the rule if they don't want to, although they may have to leave the area and go somewhere else if they don't agree. It just means that there are no rules forced on anyone against their will. And it doesn't mean that in the areas where no one wants to agree to any rules, there'd be no restraint. No, even in areas where the people want there to be no official, even in areas where the people want there to not even be any official rules, even in those areas, people would be greatly restrained out of fear of reprisal if they acted badly. So everyone would be highly polite, highly virtuous, so as to not incur the wrath of other people, so as to avoid the vengeance of other people. What I'm talking about is not Darwinianism or cruelty or mass violence or anything like that, like Square Peg was saying it was. What I'm talking about is true freedom, the unlimited rights that George Carlin talked about in that one stand-up. I don't get why people find this so hard to understand. You have the right to say whatever you want, but I have the right to kill you if I don't like what you say. So you're going to watch what you say, and I'm going to restrain myself from using violence unnecessarily, because if I don't restrain myself from being violent toward you, then your loved ones will kill me after I kill you. And then my loved ones will kill those loved ones of his, etc., etc. And nobody wants a huge feud like that. So people are going to be very restrained in what they do. And I don't want to die either, and you don't want to get shot, so we're both going to restrain ourselves, and then we'll both be polite and nonviolent most of the time. Unless someone attacks us very viciously, either verbally or physically or financially or in some other way. The whole point is absolutely essential to understand. This whole point is very, very important to understand. If you don't believe in this principle, then you don't truly believe in freedom at all. And you're not truly an anarcho-capitalist at all. And anarcho-capitalism is just unlimited freedom. That's all it is. And if you believe in any abridgments in freedom, you really believe in tyranny. And that little seed of tyranny that you believe in will turn into a huge, gigantic monstrosity of tyranny. That's what happened in the U.S. They didn't start off with narco-capitalism. They foolishly started off with statism. And then it eventually grew into the monstrous empire that you see now. If you believe in anything less than 100% unlimited freedom, then you actually believe in small-scale tyranny, the same way the libertarians do. And thus you're an advocate for something that will, quickly devolve into tyranny again. But of course, this point that I'm making seems to be either above most people's understanding, goes over their head, or most people's ability to take responsibility for. So they don't want to take responsibility for their own actions truly. So what they do is they, advocate for statism so that, Big Daddy government can tell them what to do and what not to do and can take care of them, right? Which is ridiculous. Because anything you can't do for yourself, a corporation can do for you, and then you can pay for that service. So it's not like you have to be some kind of genius to be an anarcho-capitalist and take care of yourself. No, it'll be exactly like today, but without all the tyranny, without the war, without the massive taxation, etc. Anarcho-capitalism is the most extreme level of self-responsibility, but not in an undoable way. It's totally doable. It's just you don't get to slough off the responsibility on anybody else, like our infantilized society of today, And so I think perhaps an anarchist society like this is only possible because it is the most extreme level of self-responsibility. And so I think perhaps an anarchist society like this is only possible if a bunch of people who truly understand freedom, aka anarcho-capitalism, and who are highly intelligent and highly independent and highly moral and highly courageous. If a bunch of these people get together and form their own anarchist country, then it's possible to have an anarchist country work. But if an anarchist country lets in a bunch of people with low IQs, or people who don't truly believe in freedom, or don't believe in 100% freedom, or people who are unvirtuous, or people who are cowardly, then these people will corrupt the country and will cause it to grow over time into a tyrannical country the way America grew into a tyrannical country. Although I would say that anarcho-capitalism, too, would probably definitely devolve into tyranny. But, if you don't even start out with anarcho-capitalism, it's going to devolve into tyranny real fucking quick, if not immediately. But at least with anarcho-capitalism, you might probably get 100 years of freedom out of it before it starts to devolve into tyranny. Square Peg acts like I'm wrong because I'm not basing my thoughts on natural law. He said something like that. But the whole reason we have a whole other legal system is not just tyranny, although that's a big part of it. The whole reason for it is that people cannot agree about what natural law is. It started out with like common law courts based on natural law, and then we went to, these corporate courts. Right? Why? Because no one can agree about what natural law is. It's like Frank Herbert wrote in the Dose Die experiment. He said that natural law is this delusion that mankind has had for a really long time. It's this really persistent delusion. I can't remember what the exact quote was, but, that's basically what he was saying. And that is correct. That is absolutely correct. It really does come down to nothing but power, which is why you have to give people infinite rights, infinite power, infinite freedom, so that each person can do whatever he sees fit. But other people can do the same, and that's what holds you in check. That's what holds everybody in check. The fact that everybody has that same power. Just like if everybody's got nukes, then nobody uses nukes because everybody's scared of everybody else using nukes against them. You see, same exact principle. If you try to base things on natural law, people disagree on what natural law is. So then you can't run a society based on natural law because people don't agree on what it is. Thus, you're either forced to make laws which some people don't agree with and which thus oppress those people, or you can give everyone absolute freedom and have a society like the one I'm proposing. Either tyranny or absolute freedom. That's your choice. Square Peg is wrongly equating what I'm saying with evil, right? He's saying that what I'm advocating for is evil because I say that anybody should have the right to do anything they want at any time for any reason. Yes, they have that right, but it's the self-correcting thing. It's the self-limiting thing because everybody has that right. And so everybody's scared of everybody else. Not like terrifying, but I mean like everybody's wary of everybody else, so nobody acts badly. So if anybody decides to go around raping babies or killing innocent people, then, it probably isn't going to take long at all before, several people, if not, dozens or hundreds are going to join together and kill that guy. And then problem solved. And it also disincentivizes the next potential rapist or murderer from raping and murdering. You see, so anybody who wants to be evil is going to be held accountable by everybody else. And he won't be able to get away with doing evil. All you have to do is acknowledge that everyone has the right to do whatever they want, including the other people who are not evil, and this automatically holds everyone in check. And you do this without, like, everybody has all the power, right? All the power. And so you don't have to restrict anybody's rights whatsoever. This automatically holds everyone in check without having to restrict anybody's rights whatsoever. Not to mention, who's going to go around raping or killing or stealing when they don't have to, when they're way more prosperous than they ever were under any form of statism because of there being zero taxes and unlimited freedom. And raping is going to be way, way less likely because the whole SMV market will be straightened out. And men will have high SMV again because there being no welfare and no taxation, and prostitution being illegal. Prostitution being legal will drive down female SMV, and women will have to incentivize men to get in relationships with them with character, not with sex. Today, men can't get sex without getting in relationships or something. Or at least regular guys, right? So, since they can't use prostitutes, women can just dangle their pussy in front of men. They don't have to have a good character. But if prostitution's legal, women have to have a good character. They can't dangle sex in front of men because men can just get it from a prostitute if that's all they want. You see? So then women will have much, much better moral character. Stealing will be way less likely because of there being no taxation. And back to like women having good character, obviously that's important because then there'll be little or no trading up, and then there'll be little or no promiscuity, and there'll be little or no incels and all the rest of it, right? And then men's power will be, and plus there's no government stopping men from being violent toward women when women need it, when women need to be disciplined that way. So then you're going to have a situation where men's SMV is way, way higher under anarcho-capitalism. Maybe higher than it's ever been before in human history, but definitely as high as it was back in the early days of America. Stealing will be way less likely because of, there's no taxation and everybody can do whatever they want to do to make money. So then, everybody's making really good money. I mean, obviously there'll still be poor people, but they'll be less poor than ever in human history. Like they'll be the richest poor people ever to live. For real. So everyone will be way, way richer. The women won't, XXers won't be in the workforce. So then it'll be a situation where, men are, getting paid way more. And men can easily quit and find a new job and all that, right? And murder will be way less likely because everyone gets to live with people they agree with, and everyone is moral because everyone's actually paying a price when they do screw up, or is being warned that if they do that bad deed again, there will be punishment meted out to them next time. So I'm not talking about Luciferianism or Darwinism. I'm not saying you should kill anybody who's inferior to you. That's what Square Peg was saying that I was saying. That's not what I said. I never said that. I would never be in favor of that. That's horrific. I'm saying that you have the right to, but why would you? Because anybody would see if you kill somebody just because they're inferior to you, and then everybody would kill you. So then problem solved. Those psychopathic genes are taken out of the gene pool. All those Darwinian, Luciferian assholes are taken out of the gene pool. So I'm not talking about fascism. I'm not talking about Darwinism at all. I'm talking about absolute freedom, and you have to understand the importance of absolute freedom, and you have to understand the power underlies everything, because if you don't understand the power underlies everything, then you're not going to understand the danger of the slippery slope of allowing any restriction of freedom whatsoever, and as a result of your ignorance, you're going to approve of there being a little bit of tyranny, a little bit of force, a little bit of non-consent, a little bit of infringement of freedom, a little bit of taxation, etc. And then from that, tyranny grows out of control from that little seed. Tyranny is the inevitable long-term result of having anything less than unlimited freedom. You need to realize that natural law is not a real thing, and that unfortunately power underlies everything. And the fact that power underlies everything still exists, even if you do have government or some supposed anarchy with rules, etc. Then you still have people using pure power-based means of getting their way. You get politicians making rules that operate to their own benefit. You get the Clintons using the FBI to get sexual blackmail on politicians, using their charity to steal astronomical amounts of money, etc., etc., etc. So this power principle is true whether we have government or not. The fact that, power is all that matters and is all that is real is true whether we have government or not. So why should we hamstring the people by having government? And besides, if people are so evil, government is run by people. So yeah, therefore government is always evil if people are evil and can't be trusted to not have any laws. And if people are good, then why do we need government? We can rule ourselves because we're good. You see? So either way, whether people are good inherently or evil inherently, either way government is illegitimate and stupid. Either way. And so, government or so this power principle is true whether we have government or not. And so, government or a so-called anarchy with rules or whatever does not stop people from, oh, god damn it, I think I wrote that wrong. Whatever does not stop people from undermining or misusing or breaking any rules for growing their own power. Oh, yeah, well, I think what I was saying is that, people are going to, undermine and misuse and break the rules even under the government when there are rules. So what's the point if, the government doesn't stop people from breaking the laws? What's the point of having a government? Just like, if criminals are going to use guns anyway, even if guns are outlawed, what's the point in taking away guns from people? You're only disarming the good people who would hold guns. Same thing, you're only disarming the regular people if you have government. You're not disarming the assholes who would break the rules anyway, even if we did have government, and do. You see, so there's no reason to have government whatsoever. So these structures like government, like rules, etc., merely end up being chains which restrict honest people, but which do not restrict dishonest evil people. So such rules end up being a tool that serves evil people, not good people. Government always serves evil people, not good people. This is why anarchy must always have no rules that are not consensual. And there must always be another place in the ANCAP country to escape to if you do not want to follow the supposedly consensual rules, or else the ANCAP country is just as bad as the US, where you're supposedly voluntarily paying taxes and obeying the laws because you can always renounce your citizenship, but there's no other free country, no free space, no anarchist space to go to instead, and so the best you can do is go to another country with a bunch of laws that you don't agree with and don't consent to, and thus you may as well stay in your own country because there's no truly free place as an alternative to go to instead. So true ANCAP country must have a special ANCAP area within it that always has no rules. That will never ever have any rules, not even consensually agreed upon rules. Only then can you have a true anarcho-capitalist country that has true freedom. And the only way to have truly moral people is to have a truly 100% free society where everyone else uses whatever punishments they see fit to keep people acting morally. And so almost everyone will almost certainly agree on all the most important points of morality, such as don't steal, don't kill for no good reason, don't harm others for no good reason, don't rape innocent women, don't harm children, etc. But on less important, more fuzzy, more gray area moral rules, which I really don't think are, which really are not gray at all because it's mathematical, at least like polygamy is. But, some people do disagree about whether polygamy is good or bad, right? But, these more fuzzy so-called gray areas, like spanking or marital rape or polygamy or whatever else, those things will be left up to each individual group. And each group will live how they all agree to live. And they can all live differently, but, they'll be living separately from each other, so there'll be no conflict between those people who have different ideas about what is moral and what is not. And there'll be few violations of the rules that everyone agrees to. And if something is unsustainable, such as polygamy, then it'll collapse, because it won't be able to prey on the women of the monogamous areas within the ANCAP country. Because the ANCAPers, the monogamous people keep themselves separate from the polygamists. So the polygamists will have to either oppress their own men and to force their men to be incels because, the top men are all getting 2, 3, 4 women, or there will be violent revolution in the polygamous areas, and then they'll turn monogamous too, right? Or MGTOW or whatever, with, live-in concubines, whatever. There will be change in what is unsustainable. What is unsustainable does not last, inherently, by definition, right? But, I was saying, it won't be able to prey on the women in the monogamous areas within the ANCAP country. And thus will breed revolutionaries within its own area, the polygamous area will. And those revolutionaries will force that polygamous area, such as an Islamic area, to become monogamous, or they'll just cuckishly accept their own inceldom. But either way, it won't affect the monogamous areas, as the monogamous areas won't let it affect them. They'll keep everybody who's not monogamous out. So then no one will be punishing anyone who disagrees with them, because people will all live with people who agree with their view of morality. Like, you'll have a Christian region of the ANCAP country. And within the Christian region, there will be various cities that are different denominations. You'll have a Baptist city. You'll have a Lutheran city. You'll have a Methodist city. You'll have a few villages or smaller towns which are less well-known sects of Christianity that are, smaller. That kind of thing, right? And maybe you have, Orthodox Christianity, or these Orthodox and these Orthodox, and they're similar, so they live near each other, but they still, the city's divided into two. And got the east side is one type of Orthodox Christian, and the west side is another type of Orthodox Christian. You know what I mean? So, everybody would self-segregate like that. Quite finely tuned as well, right? And then this makes it so that it's a situation where everybody agrees with everybody around them, and then no one is forcing anybody to do or believe or follow or act in a way that they don't agree with. You see, like I said, they're only going to live with people who agree with their view of morality, their view of natural law. And if one group's way is less sustainable, then they're probably going to have to suffer the consequences, because they can't infringe on your community either, and if they try to, they'll meet with violence. So that'll force them to leave your group alone. Then Square Peg said that incels don't have to go on sprees because they can just form their own community, a commune or an unincorporated city, and make it nice, so that a bunch of women want to live there and choose to live there. I already talked about that in a past video. He said he watched all my videos for 2 years, and so I assume he saw that video. I think I called it something like incel communes. He says this means that incels don't have to go on sprees, and so the implication there is that it's therefore unjustified if you're an incel, because you don't have to, because you can form a community like this, and therefore incentivize women to join that community, and then you can get sex, love, kids, etc., right? Yeah, yes and no. But I would disagree in a sense, because this necessitates not going... I would disagree that this necessitates not going on a spree always, because not all people are going on sprees because they're incels, right? Like Crucius, Terrans, and Ogdom all went on sprees for non-incel reasons, at least ostensibly. Ogdom did it because of YouTube censorship. Crucius and Terrant did it because of what they were opposed, because of the immigration and the destruction of the environment and the corporate ownership of the government, which isn't even actually a government, it's a corporation as well. It's right there in Title 28, where it says the United States means a federal corporation. So not everyone who goes on a spree is an incel. That being the case, creating communes and stuff is not necessarily going to fix the problem. And people who want to save society as a whole, not just themselves, they're pretty much forced to go on a spree, because how else do you get the attention of the apathetic sheeple? They're not going to listen to you until you force them, the sheeple that is. They're not going to listen until you force them to pay a price for ignoring the horrific problems. So this means that it's a situation where it's like Square Peg is advocating that incels and or Crucius Tarrant types just form their own communities, but just look at the history of that. The history of it is that it doesn't work. At least that's at least not for like dealing with the tyranny problem in the whole government, in the whole country, in the whole government, right? Like obviously it may help them as individuals, but it doesn't save the whole country. You know, like, I mean, look at the history of it over the last 100 years. Look at the Amish. Have they, by having their own communities, stopped the tyranny of the U.S. from growing, or the tyranny of the world from growing, such as China's tyranny? Did the Amish walking away stop the U.S. from forcing them to put orange stickers on the back of their horse-drawn wagons that they drive down the road? No. They still had to do that. And what about the people who refused to turn their gold in during the 1930s confiscation of gold? Did that stop the U.S. from waging wars using fiat currency, etc.? No. The tyranny advanced unimpeded. And what about the hippies? They tried to walk away. Did the hippies accomplish anything by walking away? No. The tyranny of the world just kept on increasing. So this whole thing of just walk away and you can build a nice commune and then you can get women there and you don't have to be an incel and therefore you don't have to go on a spree. This whole thing is not going to stop the tyranny from advancing in the society around you. And plus, like, most incels seem unwilling to join together and do this kind of thing. So how are you going to do it when no one's willing to join together to do it with you? You see? So I'm not sure that's a great, rebuttal of the validity of going on a spree. I don't think that disproves that, going on a spree or proves that going on a spree is immoral. I suppose this is a bit debatable, but that's my view on it. So there still is a moral imperative to go on a spree, in my opinion. And if men are unwilling to use forcible exsanguination en masse, then what's the point of having a bunch of red-pilled men out there? Square Peg says that we need all the red-pilled men out there that we can get, but what's the point if they're unwilling to do what the U.S. makes it necessary to do to resist it? Right? Like the U.S. makes it necessary to use force, to use forcible exsanguination, to, roll back the tyranny. So if all these red-pilled men are unwilling to do that, and they're also unwilling to form communes in which they use eugenic breeding, so that they can increase, the IQs of the people in the communes so that they can code the government out of existence by marginalizing it more and more, by putting out things like, Bitcoin and the MGTOW mirror and Tor and Tails and maybe a new Silk Road that's uncrackable or whatever. Like, if red-pilled men are unwilling to do that, then what the hell is the point of having more red-pilled men in society? It's not going to help a goddamn thing. And the elites don't care if we're red-pilled, as long as we're too cowardly to stop paying taxes. As long as we keep paying those taxes and we're too cowardly to overthrow the government, they're just happy. They don't care. They're like, hey, as long as you keep paying your taxes and you don't try to use violence against us, the government, we don't care what you think or believe or say. Not really. That's their opinion on it, pretty much. Right? And they can always use censorship for, what they don't like that we're saying or whatever, And you can't reach many people as a mere individual. And the government, in collusion with the corporations, especially Silicon Valley corporations, are controlling the digital means of spreading the word in a much wider way. So it doesn't matter how many red-pilled men we have out there. We could have 10 million red-pilled men out there. But if the internet doesn't have any videos allowing people to watch documentaries that expose that 6 million of the wandering tribe did not die in the 1940s, and that CIA is trafficking cocaine, and and that IQ does vary by race, and if there's no documentaries like that online to be seen, or not easily seen, then those red-pilled men are not going to be able to convince anybody. And therefore the government doesn't care. So really having more red-pilled men in society does not necessarily benefit anybody. It's the digital tyranny that we really need to worry about. People like Zeitgeist Eater, these are the only people who are going to save the world. Seriously. Now we should help them as much as possible by funding them and stuff. But really, the only way that we can help them is by buying silver or other precious metals or cryptocurrency that harm the U.S. government's financial system, by making it hard for the U.S. government to create bombs and its missiles and its own American Silver Eagle coin and all the rest of it, thereby proving that silver is rare, thus getting more people to buy it, thereby crashing the dollar. Yeah, that's pretty much all we can do other than forcible exsanguination of people, or probably this is the best thing we can do, is form communes and then have maybe one coder who we allow to live there for free and get free food, free shelter, free medicine, free clothing, etc. And he just codes 30 hours a week and to, make up for, the free food and shelter and all that we give him. And maybe we pay him if he wants to work more than that. One of those guys for every 10 or every 100 guys in the commune who do have jobs to pay for him, the coder, doing that could actually be really, 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 really smart, really, really good, right? Because then he doesn't have to waste his time trying to make money. He can just do coding all the time. Subversive coding, increasing freedom. Right? This is probably the best thing, even better than funding things like the Mirror. Right? The Mirror doesn't need to be funded anymore, as Zeitgeist Eater said. But, if something like that did need to be funded, it would be even better to, let the guys, have the freedom to spend their free time making money and spend, 30 to 40 hours a week coding the things like the MGTOW mirror or Couture or Tails or whatever. And then those things are being created and the guy's making his own money that he can use to fund it himself. And or maybe the commune could fund it as well if it needed a little money to keep going like the mirror did in the beginning and stuff, right? And still does, I suppose, but he's paying for it himself, Zeitgeist Eater is. But yeah, so, buying silver is also a good way to fight the government. Forcible exsanguination and saving in cryptocurrency drive up the price of cryptocurrency, or saving in precious metals to create a bottleneck to screw everything up. These are some of the few ways that we can stop the system from doing the evil that it is doing. So, acting like you can just walk away is the solution instead of going on a spree, I don't think that's valid unless you're going to form a commune and do eugenic breeding. That is also a way of fighting the elites. And as far as, you could be advocating that people go on a spree and they could end up ending the life of a Zeitgeist Eater. That's what Square Peg said. He said, well, if you went on a spree, you could end up killing a Zeitgeist Eater. How would you like that? Yeah, theoretically, but what people like him are way, 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 way rarer than Nawaltz. Like, the odds of killing a Zeitgeist Eater and going on a spree are probably 1 in 50 million. The odds of that are so low, it would basically just never happen. And even if it were a more substantive risk, it's an easy fix. Just go after XXers. Don't go after male targets. In a liberal city or whatever. You don't have to take out red-pilled guys. That's the reason you go after sheeple in the first place, like Crucius said in his manifesto. Pick that low fruit. Eventually people are probably going to be picking the low fruit so much they're going to be killing babies. For real. And I see no problem with it. For real. Why not? Because, what else is going to shake the sheeple up and wake them up to the genocide that they are ignoring committed with their tax dollars and the massive horrific divorce rate problem and the horrific incel problem and all the other horrific problems. The use of depleted uranium, etc. I mean, Jesus Christ. Like, if you can't wake the sheeple up, then you're totally justified in killing babies. Totally justified in shooting babies in a hospital in their little cribs in the intensive care unit or whatever. The NICU, what does NICU stand for? I can't remember again, but maybe it means a neonatal intensive care unit. Whatever, seriously, why not shoot babies? For real. It could be really effective, in waking the sheeple up. People are really going to wonder what the hell your message was if you kill babies. And then you could really get the word out about legal misandry and about the petrodollar and all that. And then maybe you could make the world a little bit better of a place. Do a really short little manifesto that details exactly why you did it. And then everybody reads it. And then they can't ignore the petrodollar or gynocentrism anymore on Fox News. And if they do, they just look really, really stupid for ignoring it. They're exposed as being the controlled opposition that they are. Like Crucius said in his manifesto, you can't take out politicians, you can't take out cops very easily, you can't take out the people who really should be exsanguinated, so you have to go after the low-hanging fruit. The sheeple, you have to go after them. You have to. It's a bit unfortunate, but you have to do it. Besides, like I said, the sheeple did it to themselves by turning a blind eye to the massive tyranny in America and the genocide happening overseas. They did it to themselves. Let's see here. How long have I been recording? 45 minutes. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and then the next one is going to be a third video with the same script. Continuing on with my super long script, which will be in total about 3 hours long. Anyway, this has been Redshift. Thumbs up, thumbs down, peace trucks.